Hey, you guys there?
Yep.
John, you still there?
Yes.
Okay, good. What's up, and welcome to another episode of Movie Schmovie, episode number 248. I am Steve, and who else is here with me?
I'm Ron.
And I'm John.
And we're here. I mean, somehow we're doing it, guys. I mean, making it happen.
Yes.
We got our little remote setup going so that we can kind of get on a call and chat it up and get the schmovie, the vibes going out there again. Maybe catch up with one another in the process, hopefully. Haven't talked to you guys in a bit.
We could have been doing remote episodes all along because the big thing that holds us up sometimes is wanting to get together face to face and then, not being able to do that.
Yeah.
But now it's like the fact that we have the ability and the framework for doing these remote episodes where we all are in our homes, recording ourselves separately, and then joining those files together. Like, I think that is something that, I don't know if you guys had the thought of like, well, gosh, maybe this quarantine is actually going to help us get some content out. Because now not only are we able to record from home, but now we're all three of us being forced to stay home, more or less.
Yeah.
Man, there's a silver lining right there.
There is.
So we might say we'll be back with you next week or in a couple of weeks or whatever, and actually mean it this time.
Oh, yeah. We're stuck.
Plenty of time to do things like this. So that's
we got plenty of time to talk about those movies that aren't coming out.
Yes.
Well, or are they?
All right.
Are they? Dun,
Yeah,
dun, dun.
in a different way. Spoiler.
The idea that this virus could be the thing that shortens the theater to home window is crazy. But I mean, again, I guess that's what life is: surprises one after the other.
It'd be funny if the studios presented it like that, not VOD, just in a different way with lots of A's.
Virus on demand.
Yeah.
It's funny because like it's kind of like they're reacting to like the environment situation, like what they have to do to like some of these movies that maybe aren't gonna be worth pushing back based on like the marketing that was already put forward for them. And it's like we got to get this movie out no matter what. Like we can't just like push it back or bench it or start all over again. I mean, you'll notice that the bigger movies like are not going to probably fall victim to this. I mean, if that happened, that would be the moment that shit changes permanently, I think.
Yeah.
If you're talking like if Bond hadn't been pushed back, or if Wonder Woman has some sort of compromise or something like that, like those titles. But I mean, what we're seeing like this week that we're talking about, for maybe anybody that hasn't seen it or heard it yet, but a number of theatrical releases that were, either at the very beginning of their theatrical window or maybe even a few weeks into it, due to pretty much all movie theaters closing in the country, basically have found their way on a video on demand platform for like a rental window. And in some cases, like, we're recording this on a Sunday, and like the Disney Pixar's Onward, Friday evening came out on the video on demand service, and then in 2 weeks it'll be on Disney Plus. It's interesting to see like what the criteria is, maybe on the budget or the marketing of a film, but like movies like The Invisible Man, which was in theaters for maybe only 3 weeks, The Hunt, which was only in theaters for a week. Same thing for like Emma, which was only in theaters for a week. The Way Back comes out next week or 2 weeks from now. I can't remember if it's the 24th or the 31st, but it's just crazy to see like these movies that kind of got stuck in limbo, where they had already come out. And even Onward, that's probably the biggest profile one of all those titles that I just named. To be basically forced to just adapt and do something to cover in some way, which like that film was already kind of underperforming for a Pixar film, and now will ultimately be one of the, I'm assuming one of the most, the biggest losses of the releases that they've ever put out. I mean, unless there's some monster video on demand response to it, which still, that movie would have had that in 3 months anyway. But
Yeah.
it's kind of crazy. Like, it's exciting. Like, it's kind of exciting because we like this, everybody that's into this, like, kind of tracks this progress of like the window shortening, the theatrical window shortening, and like, you know, the drum of Netflix has been banging on that for, you know, that idea for the past few years of like bringing movies to, you know, forcing movies to a shorter window, or hey, come make a movie for us and it'll be available everywhere on the same day. But, you know, those are some big titles. Like, admittedly and selfishly, like, I didn't get to see The Invisible Man in theaters yet, and I was really bummed that I was going to possibly miss it and have to wait like 3 months to see it. So, like, that title, or even The Hunt, like, you know, that's exciting, you know, I think for me, to be able to get those when they came out on Friday night for their video on demand window. And the same thing with Onward. Like, I didn't get to see that when it came out, you know, and same type of thing where, like, it's kind of crazy that you can rent it for $20 for a 48-hour window, when, you know, going to the theater for two people is more money than that. And I'm not trying to say they're apples to apples, because a movie like The Invisible Man, for sure, I would have rather seen in the theater. But there's some, I don't know, it's such a unique thing that, like John's saying, like, that this kind of viral, or this virus that this country and the world is dealing with has really kind of like brought the movie industry to its knees, you know, in a way that they were kind of already there, in terms of like the theatrical window and like just the theater experience to begin with. And like, a lot of people are wondering, and myself included, I mean, I don't think this is going to be a lasting thing, you know, like in terms of like the fact that movies aren't going to go to theaters anymore, but it'll be really interesting to see the impact and the long-term effects that this has on even just the window, like the window getting smaller, and like as a movie stays in theaters for or that window is 3 months. Like, why is it, you know, the reason, or the what do you call it, like the explanation or the justification for somebody trying to say it should be smaller. They could look at something like this, where a movie makes its money usually in the first 3 to 4 weeks, if it makes it that far, the average movie, and, you know, it could go to VOD in 6 weeks or 8 weeks, and you know, possibly make more money when it's still possibly relevant to people that didn't get to see it in theaters. But yeah, I don't know. It's just like, it's such a weird thing to hear them say that these movies are on video on demand like that quick. Like, my body did not react like in a way that I've ever reacted before. Like, I was saying, like, I was like super excited and like, holy shit, I can't wait to watch Invisible Man this Friday night. Like, that's not something I've felt for like these first run movies ever in my life, and that's kind of crazy, you know.
It is.
Well, you know, there's so much that we need to unpack and go back and pick through about what you just said, Steve. There's so much in there. One, I think we've all seen Onward, and we should definitely talk about Onward, right? Both just as a movie and as part of this new effort they're making to try to get some exposure, some return on some of these movies that are being hobbled by the theaters shutting down.
Sure.
But I think also, like, this idea of the big movies that were the tent poles and were the kind of things that were staked out on the calendar last year, and that we would have talked about when we were talking about anticipated films, those movies being wiped off the calendar, and an ambiguity around filming on movies that have largely halted. Most big movies that are filming, like dominoes, just one by one after the other, if you followed the headlines, all these movies stopped filming, all these movies are off the calendar, all these movies that were either in the theater or about to hit the theater are now looking at arriving in our homes.
Right.
And we're talking about huge films that have been put off that long. Like Fast and Furious was a movie a lot of people were very excited about, and that's a year away now, because they now need to structure a new marketing campaign around it. They can't just plop it in the theater a few months later, because a few months later there's other stuff crowding, and we don't even know if theaters are going to be open in a few months. So you can see just from the confused way I'm trying to pick through all that stuff, there's so many issues and interesting topics that are related to the stuff that we talk about all the time in theory. And suddenly the theories became real. This question of, well, how are they going to get movies out to people if the theatrical experience is not just losing steam, but not an option?
Yeah.
When the first one, the James Bond movie, got bumped back, that was like, whoa, that's crazy. They just yanked that away from people that were about to get to see that in about a month, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
And then I think the last one of the big movies to get moved was Black Widow, Marvel moving that. I somehow think Black Widow could almost be hyped as a big video on demand, home release, and it wouldn't somehow hurt the profile of that movie too much, because as much as I think that movie looks fun, I don't think that movie has a particularly high profile. It's a bigger surprise or a bigger mystery to me how you then just halt. The Billie Eilish song was already on the radio for the James Bond movie. They're going to pick that string up in November somehow. And then Fast and the Furious, who knows? Do you think there's going to be reshoots and retooling? Do you think these are movies that they would be happy to spend more time tinkering with? Or do you really think it's just a calendar decision that if it doesn't fit in April, then we can't get it in before November?
Right.
So I was gonna say, in terms of everything that's happening, these releases are being referred to as home premieres. Interesting fact about all three of those movies, they kind of fall within the Movies Anywhere package. So we kind of talked about that before. It's the situation where some studios have agreed to share these movies between services. So if you sign up for Movies Anywhere and connect your Google and iTunes and Fandango Now, and a couple other services, these movies can all be connected. What's even cooler about that is you can also share your login with a couple people. So you could technically buy a movie like Onward, which I did. I bought Onward for $20. And I could give a friend a login to my Movies Anywhere account, and they could experience the movie from like a sign-in, just like Netflix. They could have their own sign-in and access those things. So
Right.
the experience is changing, but it also can be shared in a way that is shared pretty similar to Netflix if you don't mind spending the money, however you acquire the movies. But if you decide you want to spend the money, there are ways for other people to experience it as well, which is really cool.
What was your reaction like when you were, or when we were like talking it up on our Facebook thread, or like when you saw it online, like when they just started announcing rather quickly, in my opinion, that like a lot of these titles were coming out like this Friday?
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like what? How did you react to that?
It's scary, man. Like, so it feels. So the problem with all this stuff is like, if the lights go out, right, and we're all three of us are in a room, and I say, "Hey, John, Steve, are you there?" I'm waiting for both of you to sound as calm as humanly possible, right? So I don't get scared. The problem is the lights went out and everybody's screaming. So it feels very frantic in terms of like, I want the studios to be a little calmer about it, but it feels very frantic.
Right.
In a time where we don't want to be frantic, we don't want to be scared. It feels desperate, and we don't want despair to be a trait that people are kind of exuding right now. So It scared me a little bit, to be honest with you. I don't know how you guys felt about it.
I just think of how nervous and scared these studio people are about their window closing and their likelihood of getting any kind of traction closing.
Yeah.
And with something like Onward, which I don't know anything about the numbers of Onward. I don't know how much it cost. I don't know how much it made. I don't know what it was projected to make. I don't know how it stacks up to other Pixar movies. But I can totally see that the profile of the movie was not very large to me. It might be because I have a son who's he's 12 and he's sort of self-selecting as aging out of certain things. And one of them is, going to see every animated movie. He's just not as interested. And that one just didn't really break through to my house. So I had the Pixar feeling of, I'm going to watch that. But I didn't have the excitement around, there's a new trailer, or here's a new glimpse, or it's out in theaters. And it happened to hit the theaters at a moment when I was very busy and preoccupied. So I don't know. There's a lot of reasons why when that movie was coming out on demand, I was like, that's kind of cool. But it was a real sign for me of, wow, they really feel like their best shot right now is to get some kind of buzz from the fact that this movie is available in this way, and maybe get people that wouldn't have gone to the theater to see it to now pony up $20, which is better than the nothing they were making in the theaters, maybe.
Totally.
It's tough to know, like, sometimes whether it's just my perception of a movie or whether it's really the way people are responding en masse. But I had this movie wasn't really on my radar at all. I had a kind of dutiful attitude about it, like, I will do my duty as a Pixar fan,
sure,
and I will go see it. And maybe I'll take Henry, but he wasn't interested. Nikki was more interested than Henry, and she wasn't very interested. And so, when it was available in this way, it was like, okay, I'm curious enough, and I think it's kind of neat But it just points out to me something like The Invisible Man, which was getting great reviews and I thought was going to maybe have some life as a kind of midnight movie. And maybe it made back its budget. I don't know how much it cost or how much it made either, but I know I didn't hear anything but good reports about it. So
yeah.
I was kind of like you, Steve. I was glad to be able to watch it at home, but there was that kind of creeping sensation of like, wow, how scared are they that they're not going to make their money or they're not going to make a dent in people's consciousness if people have to wait like 1 minute for this stuff. But when movies like that are being moved around, it is sort of like the thing that you just thought wouldn't happen. And I guess when you were saying about desperation, the more I talk about it, the more it reeks of desperation.
Yeah.
But it also feels like a weird kind of patient attitude to take a movie like Quiet Place 2 off the schedule and not say anything about when it might come out. And I believe that's the case with Black Widow as well. There's no stated date that it'll be available. I think both of those movies would be great movies to see at home before too long. But I also think they're a little too big for them to do that to. So I think right now this question we're asking has to be the same question that they're asking, which is like, what's the best fate for some of these movies? How much of a loss can they take on these movies that were really supposed to be the very movies that were supposed to keep the lights on for all these studios?
Right.
How would you feel if for Black Widow, Disney did a thing where for $10 you could see the movie. You get it forever for $10 on their service. You keep it, but you'd have to pay $10 for the movie. Would you do it?
Yeah, I mean, sure. If that was the only way you're going to get it, yeah.
I'm going to spend 3 or 4 times that at least, taking like my family to go see it, and that's if we don't get any refreshments. So
we don't know what's going to happen in the next couple months in terms of our access to theaters and all that stuff. So I mean, it's something to think about. Like, what if that becomes an option? Would you be down to pay for it?
I mean, I want to see it as soon as I can because I thought it looked cool, and I think the cast is really great. And so seeing Florence Pugh and David Harbour and Rachel Weisz. But I also think that there's a reason why Black Widow didn't get any closer attention before now. I mean, there's something kind of wide open about that character that doesn't seem like it sets it enough apart from other things on its own. So I'm very curious what that movie is. So yeah, if it was available in that way, I would definitely jump at it. I think it would be a quicker sell too for my family. Some of these other movies that have come out for $20, that's still a little high for just me to watch something.
Right.
I can't see them like those big titles. Like I said before, I think that's the moment that the exhibitors or the theatrical companies would realize like they are not relying on us. Like if they found a way, to put, or if they decided to and succeeded at putting a movie like that, even on the standard VOD $20 thing that they're doing for the rental period, with that specifically because it's a Disney title. So, they could do that for 3 weeks and then put it on Disney Plus. Like they could, make a shitload of money and still have it as a part of their platform. But, I just think that like that's the moment that the theatrical companies, that the exhibitor services, that they realize that a studio is not dependent on them to make money because there's other ways to make it. But I don't know if I don't know that it's there yet. I mean, like I think that another example that we haven't really talked about are the ones that like we're talking about that as an example for Black Widow, like a movie that is just going to come out on digital and not get a theatrical. Maybe it's a candidate, maybe it's not. But a movie that we're not talking about is Paramount Pictures had a film coming out in a couple weeks with Issa Rae and Kamal Nanjiani, called The Loved Ones, that they straight out just sold to Netflix. Like this movie has had marketing.
Lovebirds, I think.
Or Lovebirds, sorry, yeah. And that, had marketing, maybe seemed like a movie that wasn't going to make a lot of money, probably was going to tank, but this just fell off the schedule altogether and sold to Netflix for an undisclosed amount of money and is going to come out on Netflix shortly. Like that's going to happen to more movies that were supposed to come out in the next 2-3 months that weren't the big profile movies that we're talking about, but that were more counter programming titles or genre titles or things like that that aren't going to be rescheduled because the calendar in the future hasn't changed. Like there's a reason that these titles are moved around in a chess game because of, programming and making sure they optimize the what they can make on opening weekend. Like that's the other thing is that like they can't just take this title out of, April, May, and June and just slot it in October because October's already stacked. You know what I mean? It's just like one of those things where some of these movies that they don't see worth reinvesting money in, they're gonna just dump them and sell them to Netflix or to Hulu or to Amazon, for their Prime service or whoever the client is. They're gonna just dump them because they're not the movies that were gonna make them a lot of money to begin with, and that's kind of crazy. Like that's happening also. Like there's all these different variations of what we're talking about where. They're pushed back a year. They're pushed back indefinitely. They came out a week ago, or they're supposed to come out next week, and they're coming out on VOD now, or they're being bought by a streaming platform. Like it's the Wild West out there, like right now with some of this stuff and this decision making. It's just crazy. But yeah, I don't know. That's kind of the environment right now as it is, and it's changing. Like every couple of days, you hear more and more movies being. Announce what they're going to do about it, or if it's going to come out on VOD or anything like that. But we'll definitely keep an eye on it and keep talking about it, I'm sure, on here. But like you were saying, John, we did see some movies too that are now available on these platforms. So what did we all see? We saw Onward.
We saw Onward.
And that's going to be on Disney Plus in 2 weeks, you said.
Yeah, April 3rd. I guess it ends up being 3 weeks from Friday when it came out, I believe. Right?
So, like, is that a weird instance of Disney / Pixar just giving up on a movie in a shocking fashion? Not even The Good Dinosaur got treated like this.
I mean, to be honest, like, I can't really see any other scenario for them to do. I mean, like, if theaters are going to be closed for even if you said next month, that movie was already out for like 2 or 3 weeks, or at least 3 weeks, I guess, and. What other option is there? Like, there's no venue or medium for them to put it out in besides this. And while people are still talking about the movie, and also maybe had planned on still going to see it, like we were going to go in, this weekend to take Sydney to see it, but like it just is something that it's almost like they had no other option. I think you're right. I think it was kind of like a weird marketing program for it, and like it didn't really carry like the must-see nature that a lot of those Disney Pixar animated films do. But even still, like it got really good reviews and it was doing okay at the box office. It was underperforming for sure. I think like by the time it all is done, it like was in the 60s, 60 some million, which is a bad number for a Pixar movie, but I don't really see what other option they had. You know what I mean? Like, what else could they have done?
There's a little bit of a referendum on just the status of Pixar as a movie studio that's going to have to make movies that don't hit that emotional cinematic bullseye that their biggest movies do. Do you know what I mean? And so,
sure.
But it's weird. It's weird that it's like a knock when a Pixar film is just pretty good or just kind of good.
Yeah.
Something about the fantasy world that it's depicting, it's not as clean and clear of a concept as like, what happens when you leave the room? What do your toys do?
Sure.
Or even I don't really like cars, but a world of talking cars is like, okay, boom, you've got the concept. This is a little bit of a tricky, convoluted concept, and Pixar has had a few of those. Like Up is kind of a convoluted plot. A Good Dinosaur is a little convoluted. Other ones are that way, Ratatouille even. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I don't know. Do you guys know what I mean? That it felt like this movie, it's just like you have to get kind of into it before you start to see what it's really about. But the world that it takes place in has a kind of... It was a little fuzzy to me what that world really was. Like, I think in the end it was commenting on games and the worlds of games as much as it was commenting on, like, fantasy fiction.
Right.
This does not feel like a Pixar movie. This feels like all of the other companies that tried to imitate Pixar afterwards, after Toy Story kind of hit. And some of that means that, like, the characters, the heart of it, the humor didn't feel quite as Pixar-y, and the writing didn't feel... It felt a little muddy in terms of the dialogue, and it felt like the one of the things that's very clear sometimes in Pixar movies is the world and its guidelines. And all I really knew was that they were in a world with these troll-y sort of characters, and it felt like the backstory didn't matter so much. It was weird. Like, sometimes when I'm watching a Pixar movie, every little bit counts, right?
Right.
This felt like there was a lot of extra that didn't pay off in the end. But the end of the second to the third act, I could argue some of the best Pixar's ever done, which is another weird thing to come out of this movie. So I was very conflicted, man. But I didn't hate it. And I thought that it had a lot of good things to it, but it did not feel like a Pixar movie on any level. That was weird. It shouldn't have felt like that. So
I definitely agree that it doesn't feel like the Pixar movie like that we kind of have come to expect from them. And I think that's mainly because like the story and the world that it's in, it feels like it could be like Ronald was kind of getting at, like this story and this world and like the characters and like the it factor of this movie feels more in line with what you could expect from DreamWorks or Blue Sky or any of those animation houses that, or even Warner's recently.
It's totally DreamWorks.
Yeah, it just, I don't know, it definitely, and I kind of said this on our thread, like it felt a little more like of those mainstream generic animated with the content and with the story and the world that it's in, and it just didn't have that. It didn't have what they were going for as that original kind of Pixar magic idea, not literal magic as in the film, but like that magical thing that Pixar does when they just have that, like you said, what happens to your toys when you close the door or when you leave your room, or like what do your emotions look like, that, or like whatever your favorite Pixar movie is, and that magical thing that is like so original and so unique and just genius. Like it doesn't have that. And I think what they were going for, like the whole idea of, this magical place that magic exists and these creatures that have these special abilities that they just don't use it because of, convenience and technology and even science. Like, the natural world has been kind of subdued by technology and forward progress in ways like that is kind of cool and kind of crazy, and like, but it doesn't hit hard enough in the movie. It doesn't have the layering in the film that you would expect from it if that in fact was what they were going for. When you compare it to some of the best Pixar movies out there, and I just think that that's kind of where it hit me. Like it definitely felt like a DreamWorks movie more so. And that's not to take anything away from DreamWorks films. Like the How to Train Your Dragon movies are like some of my favorite animated movies ever, and like they have their own formula that works, but it just didn't feel like a standard Pixar movie. That said, Ronald hit it. Like the third act, I feel like does kind of feel like it kind of closes out as a Pixar movie. And overall, I still like the movie quite a bit. And I'm gonna be honest with you, like we've watched it a couple times, and in the window that we had it, because my daughter loved it, and that those moments that really kind of hit with the brothers, and the last like 10 minutes is just, I think, great. And I think the voice acting is really, I think Tom Holland and Chris Pratt, like that their voice acting and their chemistry in the movie as brothers, I thought was really good. Some of the characters are really flat and kind of generic, and even the voice performances are kind of generic, but overall I thought it was really cool. And I thought certain sequences look really great, and even still, I think it's like, I thought it was good. Like I thought it was fun and definitely hit me. I mean, really hard, being a son, a brother, a father, like that really moment at the end of the film really got me. And that's the Pixar thing that I kind of, the tying it all together of the list and the realization, like it just, that fucked me up a little bit and made me think about things a little more than I was. And,
if you've seen the movie, you'll know what we mean when we say the list. I think the list moment got me, and then there's a moment where a character is watching is kind of scrambling to look through a hole to see what is happening between two other characters at a distance. And those moments, the second one in particular, felt very Pixar to me, because Pixar always has that at its best. That when we talk about that Pixar thing of like, does it make you cry? It's all about this kind of unflinching moment where something bad happens and you feel the tragedy of it. And this movie definitely has a kind of tragic aspect to it. I think the extent to which the movie does play around with that thing of like, is this a father-son movie or is this a brother movie? And the kind of ping-pong between those two things, I think that's where you see that Pixar thing of like, what's the emotional hook of this movie? Like, where's the gut punch coming?
Right.
And you can kind of feel it coming. There is that DreamWorks-y feeling, though, and I do think that it's because of the sort of Shrek world has already been established, and this is totally different in a way, but it's also not substantially different enough from, like you said, generic characters. I do think that there are moments, though, and I think here's what makes it not like DreamWorks animation, and this is where it is very Pixar, and you alluded to how pretty it is in spots, Steve, but there's a few moments that are kind of breathtaking just in terms of what they do with atmosphere and texture, and there's always something about like they've gotten better at rendering nose hairs or whatever, with these movies. But I think there are moments in this where you see what they're going for. And there are two things that it reminded me of visually. One is Lord of the Rings, the movies.
Yeah.
And the video game Shadow of the Colossus. Have either of you guys ever played that?
Oh, yes. That's a great game.
But it had a similar sense of like magic is leaving the world, and there are these monsters left out there in this game that you're going... And I always felt sort of bad. In Shadow of the Colossus, you're defeating these monsters, but it always feels like you're killing the last of its kind in this strange way, and there's something kind of mournful. But the sense of scale, especially late in the movie, there's a kind of big creature. The way it moves and the way it works, and even the way that they have to attack it and strike at a kind of energy core that this creature has, is very video gamey. So I wondered if Shadow of the Colossus was a direct reference, because some of those landscapes were there's just this kind of empty landscape without much happening, and these characters wandering through it, and it has this lost world sort of aspect to it that really did get to me, and something about that made me wish I was looking at it on a giant screen. And that's where it did feel like Pixar. It did feel like, they worked on the visual aspect of this world. However, the character designs in some cases were actually very boring compared to what it could have been. And I think in DreamWorks, like if you could have seen, the way character design works in the How to Train Your Dragon universe is much more playful and interesting. And I would have loved to have seen a little bit more of that kind of inventiveness just in terms of the shapes of things. There was a kind of blandness to some of the characters in this. I will say that if they did render something perfectly, though, for the first time, Julie Louis-Dreyfus's character, they rendered the mom hair on that character. It's some of the best mom hair you've ever seen. And I spent the whole movie going, who's that guy with their mom's new husband or boyfriend, the centaur cop, and before realizing it's Mel Rodriguez, the guy who played Marco on Better Call Saul, and he was Todd on Last Man on Earth.
Last Man.
And now I would kind of want to see it again, knowing that's him, because I think there was a lot of him in that performance.
Definitely.
The way it was animated.
Definitely.
No, it was very good. I mean, honestly, I agree with you, Steve. I really liked it. So, Steve, you mentioned that you thought the cast was good. Ronald, how did the actors do for you? I thought that Chris Pratt was actually really great.
I loved Tom Holland and Chris Pratt. The other characters, like Lena Waithe, I recognize her voice immediately. She's been in so many things. It's kind of crazy. I love who is the restaurant owner?
Octavia Spencer.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I liked her. They sometimes I wish that Disney would kind of go back to the 90s where there were just people that were good voice actors over them being famous. Because sometimes I get a little sick of hearing people do mediocre voice work. And just because they're famous and maybe great actors doesn't mean they're good voice actors. Because that's a different skill set. So,
I feel you on that. Yeah, that's not a bad idea. I definitely feel like I've thought the same thing in a couple movies.
Yeah, it seems like Moana seemed like the only one where they were like, we're taking a chance on a young person that you've never heard of. But it was only because of like the ethnic background and the history behind that. That was a little, that made sense to me. But I think they should start doing that in general. I just want people that are good voice actors. I don't care if they're famous anymore. Like I used to, when it was starting to happen, I was like, oh, this is really cool. Now I'm like, come on, man. This mediocre performance you're putting in right now.
Yeah.
Well, it's weird to sell an animated movie on that. I was actually just saying to Nikki today, I can't believe that Robert Downey Jr. Dr. Dolittle movie existed. It's one of those trailers where it's like Craig Robinson is a rat and John Oliver is a giraffe.
Did we all see anything else together, or do we want to wait to talk about the other ones to the next episode, like Invisible Man or The Hunt? Or
Yeah, I haven't seen those yet.
You want to give us a quick Ritz from Steve Ritter? And we're supposed to have like a crunching sound effect, like you're eating Ritz crackers while you're.
I should have brought some up. I have plenty of crackers, and I should have brought some.
We don't buy Ritz anymore because of the palm oil, because we're trying to be friendly to the orangutans, and I hate it. Like I'm getting to the point where if I ever see an orangutan, I might be a little bit resentful, just because I'll be thinking about all the Nutty Buddies and the Ritz crackers and shit like that I don't eat now because of
Oh man,
because of their home. Oh, they need a home. A quick Ritz.
But yeah, so just quick Ritz, like John said. I'm actually anxious to talk to you guys about these movies, but I really liked The Invisible Man. The Hunt was fun. It was okay. I thought it was going to be a little better than it was. And then maybe by the time we talk next time, a couple other ones coming out. I did see The Way Back, the Ben Affleck movie. I thought that was great. I really liked that too. So if you're looking for some of the VOD items that are coming up over the next week or so, if we don't, eventually we'll talk about them. But The Invisible Man, I really wish I would have seen in the theater for one scene especially. And I can't wait to talk to you guys about the scene, because you'll know it when you see it. And thankfully, I did get to watch it in my basement, pretty nice sized TV with surround sound in the dark. So that was really a blast to watch. Actually, it was pretty good watching at home, but I would have liked to see that in the theater for one specific scene for sure, just to watch it with an audience, to feel the audience reaction to it.
I'm a little freaked out about that one. I mean, like I'm going to watch it, and I love horror movies, but for whatever reason, I feel like that one's going to freak me out somehow. I feel like it's going to be upsetting. Is it kind of rough, or is it more fun?
It's honestly, it's both. I mean, like it's kind of brutal in a couple moments, but it is a really cool take on what this kind of movie could be, and just the idea of manipulation, and I don't even like what is it, like gaslighting and things like that. It's just, in today's world, like this shit's pretty unfortunately pretty timely, and I think the take for this film is pretty cool and pretty original. And I think Leigh Whannell is like a really good director. Like, people know him more as a writer and even an actor in many horror films like Saw, and he's in some of the Conjuring movies, and I mean the Insidious movies, sorry. But he's got some really, I think he's going to be like a bigger director, like in the next couple of years. Like, I feel like this was the movie that is going to, this movie was doing great, by the way, before it got taken out of theater. Like, it was a $7 million budget and had already made 60 plus million. So this movie was doing great and had amazing reviews. So it's kind of a bummer that it didn't get more than 3 weeks, but I do think it'll do really well on video on demand.
But do you think it gets this little pop, though, from that maybe it might not have gotten in its fourth week in theaters? Maybe it would have had a bigger week.
Maybe.
But I'm just wondering if, like, somehow it's now a movie, one of 4 or 5 movies that people who are, even if you're just kind of attracted to this idea, I bet a lot of people rented something on Friday just because it was like, wow, here's a new thing, and it was popping up on every service, and there was a little bit of hype around it. One of you mentioned earlier the quickness of how this happened. I think The Invisible Man was one that was like, oh wow, that was a quick decision. They must have really weighed their options and thought, okay, maybe this would be like a bigger fourth weekend for this movie than it would have had in theaters. But I don't know if maybe we'll hear the numbers. I wonder if piracy just instantly then steals a movie's ability to really earn, because I think there's a lot of people who will pay for something if they get a chance, and then there's people who flatly won't. So I wonder if once a movie hits VOD, that's the problem, is that then the pirated copies are just as good as anything you could get. So it's not. I mean, that's one thing the theatrical window
sure.
gives a movie is this period where if you do want to watch some pirated version of it, you're watching a crappy cam. Someone went
Right.
into a movie theater with a camera,
Right.
and now it's like, no, you've got the same video that someone else would have. So I just wonder if like that's the thing that they just are up against, or is it that
Oh, for
piracy is still such a small percentage of people that that most people will pay? I don't know. I mean, I really wonder what that's going to mean for some of these movies, but maybe we'll hear a report about how they did soon.
Yeah, I'm very curious if they release like, and I mean, there's like websites where you can like see VOD performance and like things like that. But I'd be curious to see, how they do. But I mean, even where it got pulled, like that movie still made almost 10 times its budget in theaters. So that's a good thing for Blumhouse, for Leigh Whannell, for this film. And I mean, it's just I thought it was great. Like I really liked / loved it. I want to watch it again, hopefully. But
So his last movie was Upgrade, right?
Yeah, which I also thought was great. I love that movie too. Yeah.
I mean, that's another cheap. Am I right? That was a $10 million movie or $15 million or something, and it's made with that Jason Blum oversight of like you keep it under a certain budget and you can make whatever movie you want, kind of.
Yeah.
Leigh Whannell, maybe he's one of those guys whose name is going to keep popping up on these interesting genre films. Like I enjoyed Upgrade. I think other people were bigger on it than me. I wonder if I saw it a second time, if I would be more kind of relaxed into the tone of it. But I think that's an interesting movie because it does the job of a genre movie. It's got the scope of a futuristic movie or kind of a sci-fi movie, but it keeps it small.
Yeah.
Blumhouse is now going to say, here's a guy who can bring something in. And this is like a much smarter way, even though I haven't seen the movie, but just a cheap movie that can actually be classified as a horror film. That's a much smarter way to revitalize these Universal monsters than what they were trying with the Dark Universe or whatever that was called before.
Right.
That they tried before. Like this just feels like a much better way to say, all right, like you said, Steve, what can you take about the Invisible Man, which when it was written was a commentary on like morality, the idea of invisibility, like what could you possibly benefit from being invisible that is not sort of nefarious,
Yeah, definitely.
Invisibility is one of those powers where when you think about it, like, oh, I'd like to be able to do it, but it's like there's nothing good that you can do with invisibility. With super speed you can help, with super strength you can help, but invisibility, all you can do is like sneak around. So there is something about like what that would do to your mind if you had that ability, if you were able to be this person. So to put that in the modern world, and especially in this kind of it looks to me from the trailers like a domestic abuse situation, which is what is kind of upsetting to me and makes me wonder if I'll be able to relax and enjoy that. But it looks great, and Elizabeth Moss is almost always fantastic. So
yeah, she's fantastic. I mean, she's amazing. Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you guys about it. I don't want to say anything else, but we should catch up on that one on the next episode.
Absolutely.
Do you want to try to talk again sooner than we might? Like maybe try to do this in a week or something like that?
Yeah.
I'd love that, man.
Let's try to watch The Hunt and The Invisible Man and maybe anything else. We'll give a second quarantine report.
That works.
Yeah, man, that sounds good.
And until then, we will be wearing rubber gloves and face masks, and we won't touch our own bodies. And we will be using hand signals to communicate with our loved ones.
Yeah.
Oh man, the world we are in now
It's nuts, man.
it's only getting more and more interesting. By the time we do the next one, we'll be saying that Black Widow is on VOD. What the hell?
I know, man.
We'll be saying Black Widow was pretty good.
It's coming.
Well, movieshmovie.net and facebook.com/movieschmovies where we're at on social media. If you're catching anything at your house on video on demand, anything that you're streaming that's amazing or that we need to watch while we're doing this quarantine thing together, let us know on probably Facebook is probably the easiest way. But yeah, we'll get together sooner than later and touch on some of these new video on demand releases that coulda, shoulda, woulda been in theaters at this time. That'll be a nice do a nice catch up on all those, and make sure you guys check out. You make sure you guys get the if you can watch The Way Back too. Maybe we could talk about that. I'd be curious what you guys thought of that too.
Yeah, I'm excited to see it.
I think that comes out this Friday on video on demand. But maybe we can talk about a few different things. So, Otherwise, you guys good?
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah, I would actually like to mention, if people want to hear me and Ronald talking about an episode of the old Steven Spielberg anthology show from the 80s, Amazing Stories, you can go to FYIZ is the name of the podcast feed that it's on. I think if you go to Spotify, you can search for Amazing Stories FYIZ, and it just takes you right to it. And it's a beautiful.
That's awesome.
And Steve will actually be on a future episode of that as well. So if you're a fan of this show and you want to hear more pop culture talk from at least two of the three voices, you can check that show out. That's a show called Are They Though? An Amazing Stories podcast.
Cool.
Nice, yeah. Definitely check that out. I'm curious. I haven't watched the new one yet, but I need to catch up with it. I have not heard amazing things.
I'm not even that interested in the new one, even though theoretically it could have been this great thing that bowled people over. It's like it came out and, the trailer, the most interesting thing about it to me is that Robert Forster is the star of one, because he's a guy who died recently, but apparently did a lot of work right before he died, because he keeps popping up in things. But
yeah.
Anyway, I'm curious about it, but yeah, I'm not even as interested in it as I am the kind of nostalgia factor of the 80s version. But I think I expected to see more crazy talent attached in terms of who's writing and directing or whatever, but it doesn't seem. I mean, it's a bunch of names that maybe have done stuff, but I don't know if you've looked at the creative teams on the new ones. It's not like this. It's not like this murderer's row of interesting directors and writers.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe I'm just not familiar with them, but
You have to check them out. I haven't looked too much into it. I will though. Yeah, man. So we'll get back together in a few days or a week or so and catch up and see what we've seen.
Okay.
yes.
All right, guys. Well, as always, you've made our day. Thanks.
Bye.